Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster Rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism midweek show. Nice to have you here again. We like to do some extra shows to give you some extra information, entertainment, whatever you want. And today I'm absolutely delighted that I am joined by the MSP for Edinburgh Eastern for the SNP, and that is Ash Regan. Ash, welcome to Through a Scottish Prism. Lovely to meet you.
Hi, Roddy. Nice to see you.
Good. And how are you keeping?
Good, yeah. Yeah, it's nice to see the weather is starting to warm up a bit. It's nice to be able
Good
to
old Edinburgh, old Reekie. If I could, Ash, I'd like to, if you like, start at the beginning. I mean, you're a bigger girl, and you did your primary education in Biggar, and then you went down to Devon.
Yeah.
Did you find that hard at that age to move down, losing your pals, etc.?
I did. I heard recently they knocked my primary school down. It was one of those, I think, sort of Victorian buildings in Biggar. And a few years ago, they knocked it down. So that was, I didn't have, I think it was an interesting time at school, wasn't it? Back in those days when the teachers used to be able to throw things at you and whatever. So, but yeah, so we moved, I think I would have been about 10, and we moved down to Devon, and it was quite a big culture shock. I will say that. It was completely different. And the story I always tell is that my mum had a kilt shop. It was in one of the market, sort of like more of a market. So it was like an indoor markety space off Tuckhall Street. And she'd had a little, not like a stall, like a shop sort of, selling kilts. And she must have had, we had a lot of stock left over for years and years. We had like kilt pins and drawers and, all that kind of stuff hanging about. And so she must have sent me to school in like a child-sized kilt, obviously. Children's one, because they didn't have uniforms there. This was a school in Ilfracombe, and I remember that I caused quite a stir when I arrived with my red hair and my Scottish accent, which I had at that time, and my kilt. So yeah, I don't remember very much about it now though.
Well, you still have a Scottish accent, and it's there. It's one thing we never give up easily. But you had a great education, and you went to Keele University.
Yeah, so I went to school.
Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, and then I went to Keele, and Keele I think is, because there are some unis that I think are known for drawing a lot of their intake from a lot of the sort of the private schools and so on. Keele wasn't like that. Keele was very definitely a university, with a majority of students had been through the state education, which I didn't really notice that as much myself, but pointed out to me by other people. And I really enjoyed it there. I really enjoyed uni in general. I had a great time. It was a campus uni. So it was very intense because you were living on, it was a few miles away from the nearest town, and then and quite away from the nearest city. So I suppose it felt very much like being in that sort of student bubble, which I liked. It doesn't suit everybody, but I liked it.
Yeah, and you went into digital marketing, which I think is a great thing, because we live in the digital age, and elections to me is, people say that politics is for ugly people, acting for ugly people or something.
Showbiz for ugly people, I think they call it.
Yeah, but I believe that politics is actually for frustrated sales and marketing people.
Well, that's probably true in my case. Yeah, it's international relations at university, which obviously is like international politics. And we did, in the first year, we definitely did British politics. I remember studying that. And so I've always been interested in politics. And I now know that I was quite a weird teenager, because I remember exactly where I was when I got the news that Thatcher had gone. And I think I was 16, 17. So that's probably fairly unusual, 16, 17-year-old that, remembers that as being a big moment. And so having studied politics, I think I was interested in maybe having a career in politics at that time, but I didn't know anybody. I didn't have a friend whose dad was an MP or whose mum knew somebody who, so I kind of didn't really know what to do. And so I just kind of shelved it and went and got to do something else. So I mainly worked in public relations, technology, and then public relations after that in London, and then moved back to Scotland when I was about to start a family. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you come home in 2003, but you'd always been political then?
Always interested in politics. My dad, both my parents are Glaswegians. My dad died when I was 18. But I remember before that, I remember us all sitting around the table and talking about politics at dinner. And again, I think when that's your family life, you don't think that's unusual. And it was quite a bit later that I realised not everybody does sit around.
No.
And talk about what awful thing the Tories had done this week. That's maybe not normal for everybody. So it was quite a politically aware household. But I wasn't active in politics in any way. My granddad, though, I think had been an election agent for Labour back in the day in Glasgow, I think maybe in the 1950s. And I have a great uncle who was an MP for Dundee years ago. So I think he was in the post-war government. I think he was in like 1948. He died in a car crash. But so there's some kind of, political active people in my family history.
But when you come back to Scotland, you started working for the Commonweal. I mean, that is political.
Yeah.
Jimmy Reid. Was that a conscious decision or was that a pay the mortgage decision?
It was a conscious decision. I'd done a master's, so when I did have some time out to raise my children, and during that time I built an eco house. So I decided I wanted to build a house. It was a lot more complicated, I think, I'd thought when I undertook that. And then I did a master's degree as well, so I did development management. So that I was interested, I think, at that point in how do countries manage themselves and the processes in the country in order to get the best for the citizens who live there, which is obviously quite topical for an independent Scotland. And I was quite struck by a few things that I was studying at that point. And then I became interested in getting more involved. And I decided that there were quite enough right-wing think tanks going about, even in Scotland, where we don't have as many as they do down south. And I was obviously, having studied it, quite aware of the influence that, some of these think tanks have on policy making. And obviously we talked about Thatcher. And so there was think tanks were credited with a lot of the policies that she brought in at that time. So whether it's, selling off the council houses, I can't remember what some of the other main ones, but that certainly came up to that sort of think tank route and then became, normal discourse, and then people sort of accept it. And so it's this idea of the Overton window, which is maybe a bit techie, but the idea is that if you have lots of right-wing think tanks and they're all putting quite out there ideas at the time, so they're outriders for the right and they're like right over here, then the normal discourse starts to move over and goes more to the right. So unless you have that balance, then you do risk everything moving over. So I was kind of aware of that and thought that left-wing think tank sounds like a great idea, and that was a good opportunity to then go and lobby politicians in Scotland with ideas that were outriders for the left to try to change that. So I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say I agreed with everything that we were putting forward at the time, but the stuff that I was lobbying for at that point, I think we were definitely talking about the National Energy Company, the 4-day week, national living wage, all this kind of stuff. So it was an interesting time to be involved in them, and they're obviously still producing really good stuff now. And I speak to Robin McAlpine quite regularly.
He's a good guy. He's on here on our show quite a lot. He never fails to impress. As an old lefty myself, I agree. There's not enough left-wing tanks. Absolutely not. And what's defined as left and centre has moved. I mean, I read an article this week where they were accusing Joe Biden of being a diehard socialist, which I found. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous that the centre ground is allegedly being pulled. But when the independence referendum came along, would you say that was the light in the blue touch paper for you when you got involved in the campaign with Women for Independence?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off by just going along to the first, I guess it was the Yes meeting that was nearest to me. So it was just in a room above a pub. And I think there was maybe 5, I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head, something like 4 or 5 men and me in this room above a pub in Galshiels. And that's where I started to get involved. So I got involved in that bit first. And I had joined the SNP prior to that. So I was an SNP member at that point. And I was also going along to sort of SNP branch meetings as well. Having got involved, so once I started to get involved in Yes, then I obviously began to meet people and talk about, different ways of campaigning and the other sort of grassroots organisations. And somebody suggested to me about Women for Indie and said, "Oh, they're looking for speakers. If you want to get more involved, you could sign up with them." So I thought that was a great idea. And you'll remember at the time they were calling out all the manels, the male-only panels. But then they quickly realised that unless they could provide a female speaker to take that, to take a place on that panel, it wasn't having the impact that they wanted, because the organisers would often say, oh, well, we've asked women to come and speak and nobody wants to do it. Because I think some women are more less likely to feel like they're experts, that they have something to say. They're a bit more nervous about putting themselves forward, maybe. So without any experience whatsoever, I sort of jumped into that. And I was very nervous the first time I did it, but I sort of quickly got used to it and got involved. So I spoke at loads of Yes events, mainly in the south of Scotland area, though, and met lots of people obviously through that. So people like Colin Fox and Joan McAlpine, and loads of different people.
Yeah, it was exciting times. And then when did you decide that, I fancy being an elected representative? When did that come upon you?
So during the independence campaign, you obviously speak to lots of people and talk to them. And there's one example where some Welsh activists had come up from Plaid to help us, which was very kind of them. And I think a lot of them had come up and they were sort of dotted all over Scotland. So anyway, we ended up with some activists. And I think the one that I was talking to was a councillor in Wales. Anyway, he was saying to me, after sort of watching me interacting with various people on the street, oh, you're good at this. You should think about getting yourself elected. So I started to think about it around about that time.
Yeah, and of course you were successful, and you became the MSP for Edinburgh Eastern in the 2016 election. How did you find when you were the face on the poster? Did you feel the responsibility of that?
You do, very much so. So I tried to. I wasn't successful straight away at getting selected. I think that's it can be the more difficult part of it. Especially when you're not very well known in the party. So obviously, I wasn't somebody that's been around the party for 10 years or whose parents have been associated with the party or anything like that. So I think it was slightly harder to kind of break through in that way. So I got selected on an all-women shortlist. That was the only time I ever. So I went forward for 4 contests, I think, and that was the only time it was an all-women shortlist, and I won it just. And then, you do feel an immense sense of responsibility to, your activists who are obviously putting a lot of effort in to the party centrally. You don't want to let anyone down. You want to do a good job. So, I felt I always like to put a lot of pressure on myself. I'm trying to not do that so much these days, and just to, don't try to be perfect. I think a lot of people try to be perfect, and obviously no one can be. There's no such thing as perfect. So you just have to try and be good enough. So.
Yeah, and then of course when the boxes are getting counted and people are coming up to you at the count to say, "You're in, Ash. You're in."
Yeah.
I mean, did you realise at that time how much your life would change? I don't think a lot of people who get elected realise the huge changes that come with it.
Yeah, I don't think you do, because but I also think it's like any job, isn't it? In almost every job, it's very difficult to know what it will be like to do that job before you do it. I think sometimes you have an idea. And I think particularly for politics, as an outsider, you look at it and you think you have an idea of what's involved and what the pressures and challenges and, the good parts of the job might be. But I don't think you really understand what it's like to do the job until you're in it. So no, I don't think I really had a very good idea of what would be involved in, what the challenges and so on would be. But the SNP had already held that seat before, so that had previously been the seat held by Kenny McCaskill.
Kenny, yeah. And then so you get in, and then you were in the back benches for the first couple of years.
Yep, which I think is probably good for you. I am a bit old school, and I think that you probably shouldn't be made a minister straight away. I think there's some things to be learned on the back benches about how to do things and getting to know people and the way things operate. So I was glad to do that. And actually, I would say it took me some time to work out how to do the job, how to be effective, what I wanted to focus on, and that sort of thing, because nobody tells you. You're basically just sort of plunged into it, and it's sink or swim, and you just got to figure it out. I did at one point go to see the SNP whips, and I said to them, there's some people in here who've been here a really long time. Wouldn't it be helpful to just put together like a little handbook for, MSPs coming in, top tips, do's and don'ts, that sort of thing? They were like, yeah, that's a great idea, but it never happened.
No. I mean, what we said when Holyrood was first muted and going to be opened, it was going to be so different from Westminster, and the confrontational and all this sort of stuff would stop. But as time goes by, it seems we're getting more and more like Westminster. And it's getting more like a bear pit than a place of consensus. Would you say that's a fair description?
I think that it is better than Westminster in the sense that you should be able, I'm going to say should, because there's been some obvious examples where this hasn't happened, but you should feel as a Scottish citizen or someone who represents an organisation or a stakeholder that wants to engage with the Scottish Government, that it's much easier to get to speak to your representatives and get an appointment to talk to the government, have an event, have people come along and all that. And it is, I know that because many stakeholders have said to me, it's, especially ones that deal UK wide, they lobby Westminster and they lobby Holyrood, and they'll say, it's much easier to get an appointment with, MSPs and it is MPs and so on. So I think that is a good, so we are definitely more, I think we are more transparent. I think we are more accountable as well. But obviously we've seen, I would say with the GRR, that wasn't a good example of the way the Parliament should operate, because I felt, and I think I would have good evidence to back this up, that people presenting certain viewpoints were finding it much more difficult to get their views across. And I'm obviously talking about, the gender critical side.
And did you feel a sense in 2016? I mean, I know as a supporter, and I was a member of the SNP at that time, that when 2016 came along, what with Brexit and everything, we thought, this is it, we're about to make history. Did you have that feeling about you were going to be one of the ones that in years to come would be remembered?
Yes, I thought that I was getting elected in 2016 to get independence for Scotland. That is what I thought I was doing. That's why I wanted to get into politics at that point, and that's what I wanted to do. So, and obviously, I think we all probably understood that you wouldn't be having another referendum right away. I think we all got that. And it was that sort of idea of like, right, well, what's a reasonable period of time? How do we sort of keep things going in the meanwhile? What mechanism will we go to get there? And obviously, as a backbencher, as I was at that point, new to the party, new to politics, at that point, I certainly wouldn't have thought that, I had the right idea about how to do things. I was obviously looking to leadership and happy to support them in what I thought was, their plan to get us there and the best way of achieving that. So it took a few years before I started to think, hang on a minute, this isn't quite going as I thought it would.
Well, we're all the same. I mean, I joined while I was still at school in the late 60s and campaigned in the 70s when it wasn't easy, let me tell you. We were getting spat upon for, having to sometimes fight our way out of places. It was horrific. And then came along this issue. We all thought, everyone thought, this is it. It took some of us longer than others to realise that it wasn't going according to plan. When did it start to dawn on you that it's just maybe not going the way it should?
So I think I gave the benefit of the doubt for quite a long time. And I think I was prepared to, because I did think that, and I suppose maybe my views on this have changed slightly, but I did think, we're all in a team, and we've got the leader, and we all, we're there to support the leader and to, let them take things forward. But I started to feel that the, they've made, let's just say, the views of other members, so let's say MPs or MSPs that were outside of that, quite small leadership. I don't know how to describe it, but I felt it was quite a small number of people. I was never exactly clear who was in that very small group, but I was pretty sure it was quite a small group. And so if you were an MSP and you wanted to put forward an idea about how to do stuff, there were very few avenues for kind of getting your views heard and feeling like you had any involvement in the process. So just to give you an example, because I didn't expect this when I got into politics, I have to say I was quite surprised that we would see that something was happening or the party was going in a different direction or something was being announced, but you'd read it in the paper. You weren't getting any kind of more inside knowledge or help in developing policy or how, the direction of the party at all. You were just, you just read stuff in the paper. And I felt that there was talent, ideas, expertise, and probably experience that wasn't being utilised is probably the best way to describe it, which I thought was a shame, to be honest. So I would say probably well before we got to the GRR, to be honest, when I was looking at what was happening with the gender recognition bill, that wasn't the first point I got to. That was like the last straw for me, basically, where I felt like I couldn't be part of a government that was not listening in this way, and I felt suffering quite extensively from like policy capture is probably the way we would just describe it in government, that wasn't listening, that wasn't open to, let's say, I've taken a number of pieces of legislation through the Parliament when I was a government minister, and I was never of the view that as one person, and obviously you have a team of officials supporting you to develop the legislation, which in turn is based on consultation, the committee process and stakeholders. And I never once presented something at stage one and thought, oh, this is the bee's knees, I've got this all right, no one can tell me anything. You present it at stage one knowing and hoping that other people will look at this with a fresh pair of eyes with different experiences and think, right, we can improve this part, we need to change this bit. And I was always open to doing that. So I was quite dismayed to see the process of that piece of legislation and the fact that, there was no attempt whatsoever to modify it in any way to, I felt, capture or take on board those legitimate concerns, that women had about their safety and the way that it was interacting with, UK-wide equality law. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to embarrass you here with flattery, but did you realise what a brave decision you were taking when you became the first government minister in the history of the SNP to resign over a policy matter? Did you have any idea how it was going to explode?
I did. I obviously, having operated in a government where robust discussion was not encouraged, let's put it that way, I knew that this would not be a popular decision. And, Nicola Sturgeon is right to say that we didn't directly talk about this. So I did go to Cabinet, and I did once as a substitute end up going to Cabinet at very late notice. I unfortunately wasn't able to be very well prepared at that point, but that was back in 2019. And I did speak about it then, and she obviously face-to-face with her then. Obviously then me and others signed the open letter in 2019. So, I did for that, and I got, roundly told off by numerous different people about what I'd done and so on. So I knew exactly what was coming for me. And also, I think because of, and other people probably say, it's about the nature of the debate. So when you've watched other colleagues, not being supported, so I'm going to say, obviously, a good example of this would be somebody like Joan McAlpine or Joanna Cherry. And the things that they've said and that they've, attracted so much like online abuse. I think in Joanna Cherry's case, even going as far as like rape threats, death threats, that's that type of thing. And it hasn't been called out, and they haven't been given any support. So I quite literally did not know what I was wading into. I didn't know what would happen. You just think, I knew that I couldn't vote for it, and I had a number of conversations with special advisors. That's usually the way you do it. So you talk to the special advisor, and then you assume, maybe incorrectly, I don't know, that the special advisor will then pass that information on to either, the First Minister or, whomever else. And so I had said, I cannot vote for this. And I was sort of told, oh, wait, we'll see what we can do. And then, I just was like, I just cannot vote for this. So I'm just going to have to resign. So, so I was told, turn up and vote with the government. And I got that by a text message. And I just didn't reply and just sent my resignation letter in. So, yeah. So, no, I didn't know. I actually sent my staff in the constituency office home because I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know if they would be at risk in any way. So I sent them home just as a precautionary measure. And actually, it was fine. So I think that having had a couple of conversations with organisations like For Women Scotland, for instance, and they would probably tell you the same thing, that they think that the debate has changed a bit. So over the last couple of years, it's become more normal to express the gender critical views than perhaps it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. You were very much out there on your own if you were doing that 3 or 4 years ago. Now there's a lot more voices putting forward this type of argument. So I think by the time I got involved, although to me it felt like, I was kind of out there, I wasn't really, because a lot of other people had done the work really before me to get to that point.
It has been an absolute killer for the movement. There is no, it can be denied. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but when we come through 2014, we have got, with the Yes movement, we have got the best, most politically savvy campaigning team in probably Europe, if not even further apart. We've got a united party. We have got, we've got money in the bank, and then this and other things come along, and it all gets destroyed for what? Because we weren't allowed to debate. You weren't allowed to have a discussion. Having been in the party for a long time, I know quite a lot of people, and I know one of your colleagues, who will remain nameless, who said to me when this was coming out, "Oh, don't worry, Roddy, this will not even get to a bill stage, or not even get to a paper. And if it does, people like myself, we'll vote against it." That person has voted for everything, never once. So I know what courage it takes, and I know a lot of people admire you for it. And I would say my colleagues in Prism certainly do and appreciate it. But it wasn't appreciated by your colleagues.
No.
They've not treated you very nicely since, have they?
I get that. I do understand that. It's like what I was saying at the beginning, that, political parties, I think, are not generally doing very well when they're all fighting amongst themselves. I think we've seen that. We see it at Westminster, the Tories tearing strips off each other, and it seems more common down there. So obviously having a political party like the SNP that can put forward this very, and I always like to call it self-discipline, because people think, oh, we were being, held down with an iron fist or whatever. That's not how it was. It was very much the self-discipline, because we're not just a political party, we're a movement, we're a cause, we want Scottish independence. And so there was definitely always, and I think there still is, and it probably rightly in some cases, where you think, right, I maybe don't agree with this, but we've had the debate, I've lost the argument, and therefore, we'll vote for it, whatever. And I think there is a place for that. However, we started to get to a point, and GRR is obviously a good example of this. And, I couldn't vote for it for the reasons that I was talking about there, that I genuinely felt was putting women and girls at risk, in danger through
undoubtedly
a myriad of different ways, which we could go into if you want, but I think it's pretty well rehearsed now. People get what I mean by that. And so I was put in a position, I just felt that I would never vote for something like that. But also, I knew that this was not going to be good for independence either, because I could see that, and I suppose because I have had this conversation with colleagues at my branch actually last week, the week before, and I was saying, oh, people are writing to me and they were telling me what, and they said, oh, well, they're only writing to you because they know your views. And I said, yes, and obviously I understand that. I know that people who are upset about something are going to write to the politician that they think holds those views, that they can vent to, that can maybe help them to talk about something. So I understand that. But in the same way, I had hundreds of people write to me about that maybe someone else hadn't. So if we use Hamza as an example, these people hadn't been writing to Hamza, so I suppose he didn't have maybe the same insight into this perhaps as I did, and I knew that this was affecting membership of the SNP. And the reason I knew that was because they were writing to me in their droves, telling me that, like what you were saying, that was a classic one. Oh, I joined the SNP when I was 17, or I joined the SNP in 1974, this type of thing. And Ash, I just can't take it anymore. I'm going to leave because I can't take anymore, or I've already left. So I'm really sorry, but I can't take this anymore. So I kind of had that. And also, I suppose, wider than that, we're not just talking about SNP members. You can widen that out then to SNP voters, and then beyond that to independent supporters, and then beyond that to general public. And this is a point I made a lot in the leadership contest, but I think for some people I wasn't maybe able to spell it out quite as much as I might have liked to at the time, because certain events hadn't yet transpired. But I felt very strongly that once you lose the trust of the public, once the public start to think, hang on a minute, why are they doing this? Why are they, there's a disconnect here. They don't seem to understand what I think, what I feel, what I think is important. Once you've lost that, it's very, very difficult to get that back again. And so I felt, as somebody who wants independence, now I know there's different views on this, and actually I know you have Lloyd Quinnan on the show, and we were talking about this me and Homer had a wee chat last week, and we were talking about this, and he was saying that the old view of what I think it was the fundamentalist view was that you didn't have any policies, and just stayed in the middle of, like we were talking about the Overton window, you right in the middle, So you didn't talk about anything else except independence. You didn't want to upset anyone or do any crazy policies or whatever. So obviously things have changed. But I suppose I'm one of those people that always looked at what I was doing and thought, right, will this affect independence? Is it worth pursuing this if it's going to upset loads of people and put them off voting for us in the future because of independence? So I don't know. It's a judgment call, isn't it? And I personally felt that it was not a good road to go down for those reasons. So for the effect that it was having on women and girls' rights and also on independence. And so I just thought I can't support this. And I knew I wasn't alone. And then obviously I was quite convinced we'd lost a lot of members. And that's important on a number of levels, isn't it? Because people are like, oh, well, we've still got loads of members. And we have. That's absolutely right. We're still, the mass membership party of Scotland, which is fantastic. However, if you've lost a lot of members in a short space of time, I think you would really want to know why so that you could address that. And if you have lost, I think when I looked at it, it was something like we'd lost 30,000 between August last year and then I think February or something of that nature. And it seemed to me that it was like, I have to caveat this because I don't know exactly. I keep getting picked up on it. People say, oh, you don't know why we've lost the members. And I don't. And I don't think anybody does know. And clearly for most people that have left, and you can probably give your experience in a minute, there's a number of reasons. It may not just be one reason. But the two reasons it seemed to stand out for me were the GRR and lack of progress and independence. That's what people were telling me. And so I suspect that, for a lot of the people that had left, the GRR and lack of progress and independence was right up there. And, was a reason why we'd lost a lot of members. So for me, I think the leadership, if I was a leader or, you talk to the leadership about what they should be doing, I think we would need to be addressing that. We need to look at that, understand why people have left, and then see if there's something we can do to address that.
Yeah, I think the phrase you used there was absolutely right. I mean, one of the reasons I loved being in the SNP is we weren't a political party. We were different. We were a movement. We were like a big family. And I use the past tense because right up until November 2014, that's exactly what it was. And then it seems to me that we have become everything that we despised and set out to destroy. We're just another one of the British political parties. And that was why I left, one of the reasons. But the other thing, I just don't understand, and it maybe goes back, we're talking about a friend, Lloyd Quinn, in there. She's often opined on Prism. The problem for a lot of the people in the SNP, the new people, not like yourself, you've proved that you're a lefty, but they have no political core. It's not, they don't understand really why they're there. They just want to be there, but they don't know why. And you would hope, I mean, I know in the old days, if I saw, wait a minute, independence is at 48%, we in the SNP are at 38%. What about this 10%, guys? How do we motivate? What have we done wrong to demotivate them? How do we get them back? No one's asking that question.
Yeah.
And the question has got to be, does it help, Ash, when there's that 10% gap, when all under one banner call a march for Bannockburn, one of the most important days in the history of Scotland, and the SNP choose that same weekend to hold a special conference, and it's an absolute slap in the face to that 10% and more.
Yes. So, I mean, I was really clear about this through the leadership contest, that as someone who had been a Yes campaigner, who had, really enjoyed working with people in all political parties and no political party, I think quite importantly as well, lots of activists were not in a political party. And, some of the most effective ones that I met during that time were people that weren't in a party and had no plans to join a party, because independence isn't about a political party, really. It's separate from that. And it's not, I've felt very strongly for quite a long time now, it's not about one person. It's not about one political party. It's about all of us. It's like we're saying, it's about having a vision for the type of Scotland that you want to see. And for me, we're talking about left, right. I mean, personally, I think the SNP is often described as being a broad church, and I'm comfortable with that being the case, because I'm quite comfortable with having colleagues who don't agree with me on certain issues, and I'm okay with that. I do think that obviously we probably became more successful when we were trying to fill that vacuum that Labour had left in offering people an alternative in that space, and that actually, if you're left of centre, and broadly Scotland is left of centre, that seems like you're in a good place. So I loved the Yes campaign, and I also felt that it thrived despite Yes Scotland. at the centre, and the fact that I didn't know this at the time, but having read a few things that, the SNP were still exerting obviously quite a lot of control on Yes Scotland. I remember having phone calls with the centre and them laughing down the phone at me when I was asking for things, whatever. So you very quickly, and lots of activists around the country will recognise exactly what I'm saying now, is that you realise you weren't going to get any help. No one was coming to help you or save you or send you resources or whatever. If you wanted to do it, you had to do it yourself. And in a way, that was quite freeing. It led to quite a burst of creativity, I think. And it also very localised, targeted campaigns, because quite often what we get wrong is that somebody in Glasgow comes up with campaigns and straplines and videos, whatever, which is great if Labour are in second place and they send that out all over the country. But of course, Labour are not in second place everywhere. And so then the materials don't work, the messaging doesn't work, it doesn't tap into, like South of Scotland's a good example of that. It doesn't work in that area. You need to be talking about different things. So that was why it worked so well, why it was so vibrant, why it was so creative, and it was free to just, go off and do things. And that's why it worked so well. And I remember at the end of that in 2014 thinking, God, we really have got this amazing, like you were saying, we've got this amazing campaign resource set up now here. We have to keep this going. We have to keep it, because imagine what position we'll be in when we go into the next referendum and we still have this network of connected people set up and just ready to go. But of course, that wasn't made a priority, and we didn't look into why we'd lost. We didn't look at what worked, what didn't work. So all the things that I'd hoped would happen in 2014, they just didn't seem to happen. Everything just kind of got mothballed. And so if we start, I know that there are yes groups. I don't want to disparage. I know there are yes groups out there. I know that people are still working. I know that there are other sort of loose arrangements and groups that are trying to move, keep things together and move it forward. But it is maybe a little bit fragmented. And I think it also, I've tweeted about this the weekend, but it suffers a little bit from not having a date to work towards. I think if you had that,
sure,
it would sort of spring up again. So yeah, I think there's a number of mistakes have been made, and it would be, I think it's, when you look back, it's quite obvious to see, we should have done this, we didn't, So I think we've got a pretty good idea of what we need to do to move forward. And, I think that, the Independence Convention for me was a key part of it. Working with everybody, I think that's really important.
Sure.
We're not going to do it without doing that. And I know that a lot of people have got issues with other political parties, whether that's the Green Party, some people really have very distrustful of them, or whether it's ALBA, some people are distrustful of them. But we're not gonna be able to do this by ourselves. So we have to work. And to me, that doesn't seem to be that controversial. I genuinely don't understand why that's proving to be such a controversial statement, because to me it seems evident that we're going to have.
But did you not get a hint of that during your election campaign for the leadership, where you were advocating independence? My God.
I know. Well, and
you get into trouble for that. It's as if you're rocking the boat by going for independence.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I went into the leadership contest, is because I felt that people who are in the SNP that had views that I had, that independence is important and we should be working towards it, needed to be represented. And obviously I know Humsett and Kate pretty well. And you look around at that point and you think who's likely to go forward. You don't know for sure, but you have a good idea of who's likely to put themselves forward. And, there were other people actually who I thought would put themselves forward that didn't. But anyway, so you look at, and I just thought that, this contest is just going to be all talking about doing things in one way. And I felt we needed to have a different argument. I felt that we needed to spend more time talking about independence, talking about how to get to independence, talking about the mechanics of it, how we would run an independent country. And so that was one of the reasons that I went into it, so that we were being forced to have those conversations. And actually, I felt that it showed up some interesting things, when people are ranting at you on social media about, how, if you really want independence, you're in the wrong political party. I didn't think that was, I don't consider myself to be in the wrong party. I consider myself to be in the party that wants independence, or not the one party, but one of the parties that wants, Scottish independence. So I don't think I'm in the wrong party, because I want Scottish independence. And, that I've looked around and said, the referendum route's dead. Let's think of something else. Let's go and try and look at this from a different perspective.
But here's the point. We've jumped a few bits here. But this conference that the SNP are holding on the same day as the All in One Banner March at Bannockburn, they're discussing, it's all about referendum.
Yes.
In Section 30, and the SNP politicians are President Company excluded, and a few others, but they're still talking about Section 30. Now, I don't think there's anyone in this God's earth, apart from those people who seem to be in some kind of bubble, who believe that ever again will any English Prime Minister deign to allow Scotland, the cash cow for England, to hold a referendum. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Why did they still persevere with it?
Well, that's what I can't understand, which is why I, said in leadership contest that we're not going to do that. And also, I think, so there's a few things here. So first of all, I think it's right that we have a conference, and it is a conference. It's not anything else to discuss the independent strategy. But at that conference, we should be talking about everything, and everybody should be entitled to speak, and we should be able to debate different ideas and then see what comes out of that. I'm concerned that this looks like we're only going to be allowed to talk about one strategy, which is the referendum strategy, which I think has run out of road now, and we should be moving on from that. The other part of this is that I don't think anybody really thinks that the UK government is going to give Scotland up easily. And I think we need to let that process a little bit, and then we need to adjust how we do things. So I think we need to get probably a bit more belligerent, a bit more aggressive, a bit more assertive about how we do things. And one of those would be just not accepting that Westminster has a veto over the views of the Scottish people, because I don't believe that they do have. So we should stop acting like they do have and come up with something else. So obviously I put forward a strategy, and it wasn't new. I didn't come up with it myself. It's just, there's only a limited number of options that we've got here, which is that you just use elections. And I think it's as credible an option as anything else that's been put out there. And I think it's something that we should take a serious look at if we are serious about thinking about how we get to independence. And I don't agree this idea, that they were sort of putting forward last week, that we just keep working away and playing by the rules, and then we just try to get support up 60%, and then they'll just do what we want. I fundamentally think that's mental, and that is not going to work. I think the support is there. We showed that last time around. We went from what was independence in the polls, something like 27% before we started.
28%, yeah.
Right. We are in an amazing position right now. We're around about the 50%. Sometimes it's a little bit below. During COVID, it was a little bit above that. So if we take that around about the 50%, if we set a date and we start to campaign, and we are doing some of the things that we're all suggesting, which is we all come together and we design a really exciting campaign, and we all, take that forward, I think the support will go up. But I don't think by playing by the rules, especially we're in quite a constrained financial situation right now, where it's hard to deliver public services exceptionally at the moment. I think that's fair. It's challenging. So, trying to drive up support in that vacuum there with no date, and I just think it's going to be very difficult to do. So it wouldn't be my choice of strategy.
Absolutely. I mean, it's still a story. Westminster, if they make the rules up, and if you get to know the rules and can suddenly start using the rules to your advantage, they will change the rules. And that's just the fact. That's what they do. And people need to realise that we're up against one of the most subterfuge, fly, sleek it people who held on to an empire for hundreds of years because they were sleek it and smart. They're not stupid. And we have to, you're right, think different ways. But the tactic, you spoke earlier about the fundamentalists, and I am one of those fundies, and I was in the SNP. Independence, nothing less. And you're right, people say, well, let's talk about, whatever policy. Like, oh, really? But what was always at that time was, well, how does it help us get to independence? And Alex Salmon convinced the old fundies like me that we needed to show good governance.
Yeah.
And people would get, see we can do it with the limited powers, and it worked. And in 2014, we had a referendum and we get close. But now we have a problem, Ash, is we're not doing those basic easy things because we're going off in tangents. And I say I'm talking the royal we, a although I'm away from the SNP, it's still so embedded in me. But the SNP, should I say, are going off in tangents rather than focusing on the day job. That is the reality.
I think having been in government, I can tell you it's much more difficult than it looks. And I think that it is challenging right now, but I'm not giving excuses, because I still think you can deliver good governance even within that, a challenging framework that we're in right now. But I agree with you. We're back to what I was talking about, aren't we? We're back to trust. And if the electorate doesn't trust you and can't see that you're doing things well, then you're going to have a very difficult time trying to sell them on, independence. And I also felt as well through, the experience of the last, few years. I know people that didn't vote yes. And actually some of them are really scared. They were really scared about what it would mean for them and what it would mean for their families. And, they obviously consumed a certain sort of media, and they were exposed to Project Fear and all that, and it kind of stoked that up. And so, and we know that, there's a segment of the population that are never going to joyfully skip into the voting booth and, vote for an independent Scotland, because they're not there yet. Mm-hmm. So in order, I think, to make them feel better, I was trying to develop it during the leadership contest that you need to make them they're not going to vote for it. You need to make them feel comfortable that the bottom's not going to fall out of their world. So I suppose we're back to that again, which is competent governance, trust, and sensible policies. I also think a vision of how Scotland can be. And I was going to say that earlier, that there's no point being independent if we're just going to be the same, as we are as part of the UK. It needs to be different. It needs to feel different for people. It needs to be better. It needs to give people, we need to have to make the country better for the people that live here and give them more choices. And so you need to find a good way to present that picture to people and have them understand what you're trying to tell them, so that they can think, yeah, that makes sense to me, and I see that, and I like the sound of that, and I'm gonna vote for that. So I don't think it's super complicated, but there are sort of lots of moving parts that need to be brought into that, and everyone working together, which is, it is challenging.
Yeah, I find it. I believe the numbers are there already. I believe it yourself, that they need to be given a date, a method. Independence is a given. It's not if, it's when and how. That's the only two questions that are left to be answered, in my humble opinion. And anyone that has been through the austerity from 2008 with the British governments, Labour and Tory, who has seen Brexit, who's seen how they handled COVID, who's seen what they're doing with, arming, giving away money for munitions when our people are starving, the pensions are screwed, the WASPy women. If they're still thinking that the best bet after, Truss comes in 2 months, loses the country 73 billion quid. If they think that that's the best form of government we've got, they're never going to vote yes. But I think there's enough, and I think there's a majority. But it goes back to what we discussed, and I believe that the only way we can do that is through unity. Unity of the entire movement. Now, I would go out campaigning with Pete Wishart if I thought it would get Scotland independent. I would go with anyone who I believe, if they believe in independence, I don't care. I don't care. That is the thing. But we're nowhere near unity. How do we get unity back, Ash?
Well, I think we can. I had conversations with various different people during the leadership contest just to take the temperature on exactly that. What needs to be done? How do we do it? And I think most people are really excited about the idea of us all coming back together and working together. So I don't know exactly what the vehicle would be. My suggestion was an independence convention, because I understood that phrase. And I know that we have the Scottish Independence Convention. My understanding of that is possibly in the process of kind of being, drawn to a close, and then with a view of maybe another organisation taking its place. However, the organisation taking its place doesn't allow political parties to join, although I think politicians, well, I'm not sure if they exclude politicians. I think members of political parties can, so that maybe that would work anyway. So we'll have to see how that develops. But I think I'm with you on this. I think that the people out there who, were activists before, maybe like me, and they want independence, whatever party or not a party that they're in, I think they will work together to get there. But I think that the people who are in a position to demonstrate leadership on this issue need to do that. And so that's what I've been trying to do. And so I would say it's quite disappointing when other events are being held at the same time as independence marches. So I'll just give an example of that. So obviously at the Glasgow March, which was a few weeks ago, there was another demonstration being held in Edinburgh. I believe it was an anti-monarchy demonstration. Yeah. Now, personally, I just think probably would be better to have had that on a different day. Completely agree with the sentiment of that, but it probably wasn't a good choice of date. That's all I'm saying. And we could all be showing unity like you're talking about, which I think we did do at Glasgow. There was a variety of different speakers. There was obviously, people from lots of different parties who were marching. Yeah. Great. It was very uplifting. It actually really took me back to 2014. I thoroughly enjoyed my day out in Glasgow.
If I could just be devil's advocate for a minute or two. The problem is, I would suggest, with the leadership of your party, you might think this is not fair criticism, and if it is, please say so. But it seems that they're more interested in retaining power than gaining independence. Now, that's how, from the outside looking in, it looks. How do you get around that?
Well, I don't know if that is the case. You would have, you have to get them on and ask them what they think. I think
if only they would come on.
Well, so I think that, and I made my argument. So I made my argument in the leadership contact, very clear about all this stuff. I said these were the things that we need to do. I felt was based on, an analysis of where we're at, and that if we kept going. I explicitly said this, I think, in the first speech, the first hustings, that if we kept going the way we were going, we were going to be in very serious trouble. And I still think that's true. But I think there's time to turn it around. I don't think it's, we're finished. I think there is time. So let's see. I'm gonna go to the special conference. I'm not going to call it a convention. I'm going to call it a special conference. So I'm going to go to the special conference about independence, and I really want to speak. So I hope I'll be allowed to speak. And I would like to put forward an argument for the elections being used, the ballot box option rather than a referendum route.
Mm-hmm. And you think you'll be given that opportunity?
I hope so. Don't know.
Yeah, the problem is with a lot of conferences, as the parties get bigger, it seems that they get more restricted and restrained, and only certain people. It happened with Chris McElhenney and Angus Brendan McNeil. They weren't allowed onto the platform to talk about independence at an independence party's conference. It is quite bizarre, really quite bizarre. Yeah. So the other one was, which I thought was a terribly insulting and stupid thing to say, was Jamie Hepburn, the Minister for Independence, who actually slagged off, slaughtered 20,000 people in Glasgow, who in torrential rain marched the full length of the city, and he makes it out as if you don't win it that way, it's useless. It was really quite insulting, and even if he believes that to be true, he shouldn't have said it, should he?
No, I don't think so. I think we've been here before. I remember other colleagues of mine making similar remarks a few years ago. It was reported in the National, I think, where they were, I felt, being quite disparaging about marches. I get it. It's not everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. If you don't want to go to it, you don't have to go. But I think for a lot of people at the moment where there isn't like we're saying, we haven't set a date. Although there is some campaigning going forward, it's not like it was when we were in the middle of summer 2014, and it was all hands to the, we're all out there campaigning. And it can be great for people to be in that environment. It certainly had that effect on me, where you feel uplifted by being with lots of people who have that, I feel like, that positive engagement with the idea of Scotland being independent, and are hopeful for it and passionate about it and want to work towards it. And it's such a hopeful, optimistic spectacle, seeing people walking along holding flags, babies, dogs. It's great.
Absolutely.
Different people, like we were saying, different political parties. And I would say to you that most of the people that were watching us were waving, smiling, singing along. They came out to look, and I think and also it gives people who, maybe if you are an independence campaigner and you don't know many other independence campaigners, it gives you an opportunity to come and meet people that you maybe have met before, and get that camaraderie going and that sense of connection and community, which is really important for keeping individuals going in and giving them that encouragement. So I can understand it's not for everybody, but I think it's an important demonstration of the support for independence. And surely, that it's part of the campaign and part of the way we do things. And also, if you go to other countries, and I'm thinking particularly, I was in Barcelona for my 40th birthday. So that's going.
You didn't pop in and say hello?
Yeah, it was about 9 years ago now. And my birthday is on 8th March. It's the International Women's Day. And my goodness, they know how to turn out.
Oh, for
and
sure.
There was thousands and thousands and thousands. And it seemed to be a sort of it looked like it was something like anarchists, feminists against the patriarchy or something. I was trying to read the banner, which obviously wasn't in English. And I think I got the gist of it. So that, it is part of it in other countries, and particularly that region, it's quite normal to go out and walk through the streets to make a point about what you believe in. It's encouraged. Thousands of other people will join you. We're maybe not so used to it in the UK, but that doesn't mean it's wrong or it doesn't have a purpose. I think in lots of other places, it's very normal behavior, and it does show that level of support. It shows people's passion, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I mean, I know with Prism, when I meet people, and my colleagues as well, they meet people, and they say about Prism, for example, and about All Under One Banner, that it gives us hope. It gives us something to hang on to, because not everyone can go and canvass and knock on doors and convince people. Not everyone can go and deliver leaflets, but they can walk. So a lot of them, when they arrive at the venue to give support, and that's why I think it's part of a big jigsaw. And I think the first thing is unity of all the yes movement back to 2014, if you like, almost all the political parties. Put aside the differences. I mean, I remember going back to my great heroine, Winnie Ewing, talking about the time of the 1979 devolution. And she was talking about, what do you call him? For goodness sake, the man in the famous the Bathgate question. Oh, dearie me, how could I have forgotten your name, Lord, whatever your name is?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, she talked about if going down the slippery slope to independence. And she said, if I've got a Tory in one hand and a Labour man in the other, I'll slide down together. I'm of that ilk, and I think the fundamental group and are of that group. Whoever's there, let's get together and let's work together, because it's the only way Scotland's going to get free. And at the moment, I'm not, greatly hopeful. How about you? Have you got confidence?
Confidence in
that we're on track, or getting close to getting back on track?
Honestly?
Yes, absolutely. Honestly, I don't want you to tell me lies.
No. I'm quite concerned about where we are right now. I feel like I said before, I don't think it doesn't have to be terminal. I think we need to change the way we're doing things in certain areas. I believe we should look at the last 8 years and learn from what has gone before there. And that doesn't mean you do everything totally differently, but you have to look at it, analyze it, and think, right, what worked, what didn't work, and let's adjust how we go forward. And doing things the same just because we've done them the same before, to me, that isn't going to work. And I'm sensing out there definitely frustration. I'm sensing anger. I'm talking about current SNP members or recently left SNP members. Frustration and a bit of anger and a bit of disillusionment. But I hope that things will get better and improve, and I think they can. So I'm going to see how things go at the special conference. I think that is a good idea for us to get together and have a chat about it. And I also think that there are people in the wider movement who are looking at the SNP and really hoping that we can, move the argument forward and come up with a good strategy so that they can then support us to move this forward. Because most people, see us obviously as the electoral, we're the largest political party, if you like. The
political wing of the movement.
Yes. And so they're looking to us for leadership, direction, and hoping that will come forward. And it can, but I'm a little bit concerned at the moment about the direction that we're going in.
The ludicrous thing is, because of the unions for so long have done SNP bad, SNP have got away with quite a bit, actually, of SNP bad, for want of a better phrase. And people are very defensive. But also, if the party was to turn around and do a wee bit of mea culpa, they would be forgiven immediately. The people who have left, they just need people to say, look, we screwed up, or this wasn't good, we're doing this, that, and the next thing. But if they keep going on, as in continuity, as we all warn, if they keep just going down the same road, what was it Einstein said, doing the same things over and over and thinking you're going to get different results? Ain't going to happen. There has to be change, Ash. I hope you're part of it.
Well, there does. However, obviously I was finishing off what I was saying is that I set out those arguments, during the leadership contest, and I came third. So arguably, people didn't agree with what I was saying, and they didn't think that was the right choice for the party at the moment. And I respect their choice. They chose a different candidate with a different message, and they wanted to go in a different direction, or they wanted to go in the same, they wanted to go with continuity, which was their choice. So I can keep making these arguments, and I think it is gaining traction. I think many people can see that the referendum route is not looking, as good as it was looking 5 years ago. That people can see that so, and that perhaps they're starting to look, and I'm talking about SNP members now. They're starting to think, maybe we should be looking at going in a different direction. So we just have to wait and see. But I think that keeping talking about it is really important. Obviously, I asked the question of Jamie Hepburn in the chamber last week about. It was an
excellent question.
I'll continue to do that because I feel that's my job. I feel like I'm representing people with those views who want to have answers to these questions. So I'll continue to do that. However, I am quite unpopular with certain people at the moment. So to put it mildly. So. But
you're popular elsewhere.
Yes, perhaps. But yeah. So I think it's important, and it's important enough to me to want to put up with a bit of discomfort, perhaps, let's put it that way. It's always much easier to just, sit down and be quiet and go along with everything. It's not as easy to put your head above the parapet and say, hang on a minute, I think this isn't quite right. We should be looking at this. But I'll just keep going.
But I mentioned earlier the 10%, are now no longer pro-independence but not voting SNP. And then there's the 12% of SNP members who voted for you and your very principles of independence, nothing less, constitutional convention. So there's a 22%. Now, someone within the SNP needs to look at that. 22% can mean an awful lot of seats. And all you have to do is say, I accept your hand of friendship, the hand of unity. Let's work together. Let's not work against each other. That's what needs to be done. And I think you coming on this show today have shown that there is people within the SNP who understand and get that. And I would say to any of them, if you want to come on here, you're welcome. You can see Ashes get away, no bruises, no cuts, no bear pits. Do the same. We need to talk. We need to unify. We need to come up with a plan. We can't go on like this.
Yeah.
Ash, we've overshot our runway here, which is, I could go on for probably the same again. No, I really would like to thank you. Again, you're showing your bravery, because I know not a lot of people in the SNP, or a lot of people in the SNP, will not be happy you've done this.
Yeah.
But I'm appreciative. I know our audience is, and that's a big audience of voters, SNP, a big audience. That if you treat them nicely, they might just give you another chance. So thank you, and I hope you'll come back and speak to us again sometime soon.
Definitely, yeah, love to.
And we'll always be here supporting you. And to you, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed and appreciated very much Ash taking the time to come and talk to us today. And until I see you all again in the near future, you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster Rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.